What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. We got a fun one for you today. And then, Rob, you got a bunch of gigs coming up, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I'm porching heavy over the next month. We're in the heart of Porch Tour right now, and we're doing a Pennsylvania run. So you got Doylestown, PA, Brewston Mills, West Virginia, Johnston, PA, and then home for a couple days, and then back out on the road. Go to porchtour.com.
Yes, that's right. And of course, my next stop will be the Comedy Mothership in a few weeks.
All sold out. You don't even need to plug that.
It's true. No, at this point, I'm just bragging. I'm not even, you missed it. Yes, I believe they are all sold out. I'll let you know if they're, sometimes, there's somebody, I see a tweet or something like bought tickets and can't go or something like that. So if anything frees up, I will let you know, but very much looking forward to that. It's always a real fun time to go do a weekend out there at the Mothership. And then we got stuff for the rest of the year. I know we got, off the top of my head, we got Tacoma and Spokane and a bunch of other fun gigs.
Tampa at some point. I know that's
right.
On the lineup.
That's right. We're going back to Side Splitters. Looking forward to all those. It's a lot of our favorite clubs there. So comictapesmith.com for all those ticket links. I was so anyway, I did Piers Morgan right before we recorded this show, which is always a fun time. And actually my debate opponent didn't make it to the show. So it was just a one-on-one with Piers Morgan, which is the first time we've done that. It was very fun. But so I'm in there. The way it works on Piers Morgan's thing is it's like you come on to, sometimes like you're kind of like in a Zoom, but the show's going on, like the show before you that he's recording, because he records them like back to back. And so I was watching the panel before me, and it really was, they were debating Israel, Gaza. And it was just, as I'm sitting there, so I'm just sitting here, just watching the Piers Morgan show, but you're getting ready to go on. And it was just, and I thought I was getting ready to go on for a debate at the time. But you're watching it, and it was one of the things that I was really thinking of was just how difficult it is at this point for the defenders of Israel to even put up an argument. And it's just there's just one guy who's defending Israel, and he's just getting creamed by everyone. And it's like, it's just, so I ended up talking about this a little bit with Piers, but it was one of the things that just kind of came to me as I was watching this. But I was like, Piers, it's South Africa brought its case to the International Court of Justice in December of 2023. We're now, I don't know, I'm not good with math, but what would make it 19 months later, right? It was December of 23. We are now in July of 25. And just last month, there's the story in Haaretz broke about the IDF soldiers being given orders to shoot into the famished crowds as they're trying to get something. Like, all I'm saying is, like, when you're doing that, 19 months after it was found that you were plausibly committing a genocide, and at the same time, again, 19 months after you were plausibly committing a genocide, you're setting up concentration camps and meeting around the world about where you're going to cleanse these people to. It's just on a pure like debate level, you were like, Jesus, what a tough hand this guy has, that he's got to come out here and argue on that side of. And of course, the argument is like, or of course the point is like, just stop doing it, dude. Like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to defend this. Like, it's not that crazy to just go, yeah, they've gone way too far, they should stop. But this guy was trying. I guess give him credit for that. But man, was he just getting creamed. But anyway, that was just on my mind. And of course, the thing we were going to talk about on the show today is that yesterday, Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday it was released. I'm not sure when they recorded it, but yesterday there was an interview with Benjamin Netanyahu on the Nelk boys, because he knows, like, you can't, Rob, just how hilarious is this? Benjamin Netanyahu knows he's down big in the fourth quarter. He's losing public opinion. And so he takes it to the Nelk boys to sit for tough questioning. I don't know. And it just seemed like a weird, like, there's one thing when Donald Trump was on the campaign and he was doing everything, but for that to be like the show that Netanyahu comes on seemed very strange to me. Did you have any thoughts just when you heard that Netanyahu was going to be on this show or anything like that?
Well, I mean, this is already old news, but I think it really showcases just how much of a moron Kamala Harris was, that she couldn't swing sitting down for a podcast and coming. Netanyahu can show up to a random American podcast, just sit down, lie through his teeth for 2 hours, and come off like, oh, that guy seems reasonable. And so, firstly, I mean, the gauntlet is now down to any Democrat that if you're unable to just go on your typical American podcast and come off like a human being, you're not even Netanyahu. I don't think English is his first language. Clearly
no, he's very good. He speaks very good English. So that's a big part of why he's the longest serving prime minister in Israeli history, though, is because he does speak with only a hint of a Hebrew accent.
But I'm just saying, if you're an American politician, you don't have to sell us on killing kids in Gaza, and English is your first language. You should be able to swing it.
No, it's a fair point that you're making. Like, Netanyahu could look at Pete Buttigieg or Kamala Harris or something and be like, this is my second language and I'm actively committing a genocide, and I pulled it off. So, like, and I don't know whether he pulled it off or not. I'm not so sure. I think I'll say this before we even get into some of the clips. I should preface by saying I do not know who the Nelk boys are. That is not a comment on them at all. That's a comment on me.
Old.
That's just
I
don't know. I don't know, like, the biggest pop musicians, and I don't know a lot of stuff that's going on. So not at all a comment on them. From what I understand, they're a huge show, but they're a show for young people, and I'm 42. I'm not supposed to be listening to the Nelk boys. Or watching the Nelk boys. So I don't know their stuff or what I don't know about their show. I did see a lot of people were giving them heat for having Netanyahu on, and I will defend them on that. I think that's wrong. And I think that's the wrong attitude to have. Like, I don't go, oh, you shouldn't have platformed him and given him this easy interview or whatever. I think that that stuff is always more beneficial than harmful. And in fact, I think sometimes when you get a guy like Netanyahu, while I would like to see him do lots of shows, I'd like to see him do shows that are much more aggressive and confrontational as well. There's value in both. And there's sometimes people get guarded and defensive when it's a combative show, whereas they'll reveal things and be on record having said certain things when it's a more comfortable environment. So I did think it was unfair to be giving them like a hard time for having them on. I think more is always better than less when it comes to speech and shows and platforming and all that stuff. So anyway, so I did not think that they did anything wrong in doing it. They seemed to me, from the clips that I saw, to be like, I think it's not a political show, and they're not guys who are super interested in or what I said, they're not like politics guys. They're not like the guys who are going to be asking him questions about the latest report, about the latest, shelter being bombed or whatever. But at the same time, I do think there's value in it. I think there's something in the more meta sense that is just revealing about, like, Netanyahu even sitting down with the Nelk boys seems to me to be some type of admission, like some type of admission about how, like, we are losing this like young podcast bro space that is the new dominant media space, and we really got to try to figure that out. And I do not, I highly doubt that this appearance by Benjamin Netanyahu is going to help him in that department. As I was looking at it, I was like, I just don't see any way that this is going to be appealing to, like, the young guys who watch this type of content. That's my guess, but I suppose I could be wrong.
I didn't have that much patience for it, because it's listen, I guess kudos to the guys for having him on and for asking some tough questions, such as you're being criticized for how many kids are being killed in Gaza. I mean, at least the fact that they're confronting said questions, which, in a traditional fluff piece interview, there would be things that aren't even on limits, that are off limits to even force a person to try and clarify. In my opinion, as I listen to Netanyahu, it's just all lies. There's nothing that's based in reality. So you're just kind of hearing his pitch. You might as well go watch him when he gives a speech to Congress or elsewhere. So I didn't have that much patience for it. I watched about 35 minutes because it's just pure, platform for Netanyahu to just kind of, you know what I mean? I like,
Well,
and I hate being on the
same.
side of, we don't need an expert, but we need someone who can ask better clarifying questions, like whatever. They have their show, and it, good for him. I guess he wants to come to America and get more support for what he's doing. So he's trying to figure out where he can go. And obviously he doesn't want to be asked harsh questions. So this was the spot that he picked on this one. But I guess if you're actually interested in a little bit more substance, or watching him really try and answer for, some of the atrocities, you're not going to find it on this show.
Well, yeah, but it does, if nothing else, it opens the door for, say, like us to respond to some of the stuff that he's talking about. But I agree with you. For us having different levels of patience, I also got about 35 minutes into it. So, that's how much it means at the end of the day. Anyway, let's just start playing some of the clips here, and we will give our thoughts on it.
Interesting.
No, the answer is no.
I think you definitely have a tough job, but why do you think you're like so hated worldwide?
Well, a lot of propaganda. First of all, I'm not hated worldwide. I just received this. I just talked to someone, a rabbi, and he says he just heard from his brother, who was in Europe, okay, and one of the countries of Europe, and he says that he's being flooded. They know he's from Israel. All the people are coming and they say, "You did this amazing thing for all of us," okay. The Chancellor of Germany said Israel did the work for all of us, the new Chancellor of Germany, okay? I hear, they had the G7. The president told me they were all going crazy, in a positive way, because we liberated them, because those Iranian missiles were geared at Europe too, and ultimately at America with nuclear warheads. So we had the guts to do this. And, the propaganda is there. I don't deny it. But people also have, sometimes the truth beckons. And what Israel did with President Trump is safeguard free societies from a menace. This Iranian regime hangs gays from cranes, shoots women on the sidewalk for not covering their hair, oppresses their people, spreads terrorism worldwide, kills Americans wholesale, tries to murder the American president, the former Secretary of State, the former National Security Advisor. So people's heads, if people are turned that way, the question you have to ask is not why do they hate me or President Trump, is why don't they see reality? Why don't they see what's good for them? And the answer is most of them do if you tell them the facts. But how do you tell them the facts over TikTok? You guys are there. You tell me, what's the suggestion? You got any ideas for me?
I don't think it's the Iran thing. The main thing I just see is
Pause it for a second.
People like,
because yes, it is. That is a good follow-up so far. That I don't really think it's the Iran thing is why everybody hates you, but it is funny to have to kind of dance this dance where you have to give an answer for why everybody hates you so much, but you also have to kind of go like, "Nah, dude, people love me. That's not a problem at all." And then it's, of course, like as you said, Rob, just the pure propaganda talking about how the missiles with nuclear warheads were pointed at them. Like, of course, this isn't true. Everybody knows there weren't missiles with nuclear warheads. Like, Iran is so many steps away from having missiles with nuclear warheads on them. They're enriching at 60%. So, like, those missiles never existed. Those people thanking you for taking out the missiles that never existed also never existed. This is all just pure politician spin. But I guess maybe where I'd see this maybe a little different than you, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, is that I just look at this and I go, oh, dude, this is convincing no one. Because he didn't even address any of the reasons why people hate him. And like the reasons why people hate him, the first reason across the world is because of the level of human suffering that's being inflicted on the people of Gaza. The other reason people hate him is maybe for like having a history of always trying to kill the peace process. And then the reason more specifically why Americans hate him is because he's always trying to lure us into another war. And he doesn't address any of that. So I just felt like this was weak politician spin and him kind of demonstrating he can't answer a very simple question.
It's not persuasive to me because I know that he's lying. And I mean, this is such a ridiculous lie of, well, the smart people in the know, they called me up to thank me. So sure, you might be just talking to your dumb friends, but smart
Yeah.
people are calling me up and going, you did us such a favor. Sometimes, the people that love Trump love him, and the people that hate him, it's because he's lying. But the people that love him, they also kind of know he's lying, but it's fun the way he lies, and it's bluster. And it was the same thing with Biden. I hated him
Right.
because I know he's lying, and some people will watch him and go, "Oh, I love this guy. You look at how truthful and I." So when someone's just kind of being matter of fact, the way Netanyahu is here, and just being such a good liar, where there's no tells, and he's just right down the middle. Hey, here's my talking points. It's hard for me to answer for how other people will see it.
Yeah, no, I guess that's a fair point. All right, here, let's keep playing because I was interested in this follow-up.
If civilians are getting injured or killed.
We don't want it either.
Yeah.
Well, I think the other issue too is you see there's a lot more Palestinian protests. You don't see very many Israeli protests, so you're going to see that on TikTok.
It's organized, it's systemic, but it doesn't make it true. I mean, so what? Yeah, you have it. But what are they protesting for? I mean, look, most of the Arab world has made peace with Israel. We've had 4 historic peace accords. People said you can never have peace because the Palestinians, you first have to solve the Palestinian issue. Well, the Palestinians have been fighting us for 100 years before there was even a state of Israel. And they're not fighting for a state. They don't want a state next to Israel. They want a state instead of Israel.
Here,
And
can you
they
pause
teach
it
their
for a second
children
there?
that the
'Cause
greatest...
this is actually really fascinating what he said right there, and I think a lot of people will miss this, but he was defending the Netanyahu doctrine and the clean break strategy. That's what he was saying right there, where he goes, look at all the peace we've made in the region with all these other Arab countries, and people said you'd have to make peace with the Palestinians first before you could make peace with these other nation states. And he's going, no, but see, we didn't. And that's what the clean break strategy was all about. That was the whole thing, was that the Yitzhak Rabin doctrine was that we got to make peace with the Palestinians. Otherwise, we'll never be able to make peace with the rest of the broader Arab and Muslim world. And Netanyahu and the Likud doctrine was like, no, we can do it through other means. And so who's he talking about? He makes peace with. Okay, well, he makes peace with who? Egypt and Jordan and I guess Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. But in other words, all the U.S. sock puppets, all the dictatorships who America, when we're not spreading democracy, we're propping up dictatorship, and we have to give all of them billions of dollars in order for them to maintain this peace, in order for them to sell out the Palestinians. And of course, he wasn't getting along with Saddam Hussein or Muammar Gaddafi or Bashar al-Assad, and he had the U.S. overthrow all of them. Or I guess Assad, we helped and they aided in it too. But so that is really, even though, again, like you said, this is not something normies would pick up on there, but this is him defending the doctrine that and look, Rob, look, it worked. It worked, right? They made all of these agreements with the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Jordan and all these countries. Okay, great. It worked. And all it cost was like $8 trillion, like thousands of American lives, tens of thousands, if you count the ones who commit suicide, completely destabilizing the region, killing millions of people, plus, all of the slaughtering of Palestinians that's had to be done. That was the only price tag. But aside from that, it works. And I guess also you could add to the price tag turning the entire world against Israel. But anyway, it is remarkable that they can still brag about, and then people will I think sometimes don't understand why I harp on the clean break strategy so much in the 7 countries in 5 years, but because that is it. That's what's at the heart of this. And that is him saying it himself, whether he's being explicit and clear about it or not. That's what he's talking about. That actually, see, all these guys were dumb and I'm really smart because they all thought I'd have to give up what? Because making peace with the Palestinians requires what? Agreeing to the 67 borders and agreeing that you don't get the Wailing Wall and you don't get East Jerusalem and you don't get Gaza and you don't get the West Bank. Well, that doesn't jive with the Greater Israel Project now, does it? And so he's basically bragging, I was able to make peace and keep the Greater Israel conflict alive. Except the thing is that would make sense if you could describe it all, what we have now as peace. I mean, I guess if you have no value for Palestinian life, then it kind of is peace, right? There's not a lot of IDF soldiers dying in the war. Or there's some, but there's not a lot. So, hey, strategy's working. It's really actually pretty sick when you actually think about what he's saying there.
I would also love a definition on who the Palestinian people are. So am I supposed to believe that every single civilian in, I guess, the West Bank or in Gaza does not want to live peacefully next to Israel, but will only wants to take over all of Israel? And then what about all the Arab Israelis? What about all those people that I guess were just lucky enough to be in the remaining territories of Israel? I mean, what's the ethnic difference between them, or even religious difference between them and the people who are living in Ramallah or living in Gaza? Like, they're just, some are naturalized citizens and some aren't. So
that's right.
Why don't those people want Israel's destruction? How are you able to incorporate them into Israel without them just constantly engaging in suicide bombing and trying to get rid of you?
All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is My Patriot Supply. According to the Department of Energy, blackouts could increase by 10,000% over the next few months. It's because of massive energy demands from AI data centers and aging fragile power grid that just can't keep up. Now, we don't know what's going to happen, but I will say that after the COVID years, I always would rather be more prepared than less. And that's why I got the Grid Doctor 3300 from My Patriot Supply. It's a powerful solar generator that runs refrigerators, AC units, medical devices, power tools, anything you need to ride out a blackout. And now, for their Christmas in July event, they're including over $1,000 in free survival gear with your generator, including an emergency food supply, water filtration, survival tools, and more. You heard that right. Over $1,000 in free gear for a limited time. Head over to mypatriotsupply.com/problem. That's mypatriotsupply.com/problem and grab the Christmas in July bundle before it's gone. Again, that's mypatriotsupply.com/problem and get prepared today. Yeah. No, in some cases, they're family members. You know what I mean? Like, they were just, some of them happened to get ethnically cleansed out and some of them didn't. Yeah. All right, let's go to the next clip. Because there's some more interesting stuff in here.
Around this stuff, but you can't build peace or security on the rocks. They'll crash. I mean, these things will crash on the rocks of Middle Eastern realities. You can only build peace on truth and reality, not on deliberate, falsified fantasy.
Why do they say Israel's like starving the people of Gaza?
Well, because we're trying to get the food in, and we let food trucks in, and guess what happens when we let them in? Hamas steals the food, takes the good chunk for itself, then sells at inflated prices. They jack up the prices, and then they sell the food to its population, to its hungry population, if they give them at all, and then use the money that they take from their own people to recruit more killers into their terror machine. That's what happens.
Why are more Palestinians not siding with Israel against Hamas then?
Here,
Well, up to now they've been terrorized, but guess what's happened?
Okay, so this is I thought this was one of the most interesting clips of the whole thing, and it is first of all, obviously obviously Benjamin Netanyahu is lying. It's like that's kind of a given, but even by his own lies, I find this to be just the most horrifically immoral logic. That, by the way, is the same logic for sanctions regimes around the world. It's not as if Israel is unique in this evil. America is certainly guilty of it too, but Israel's is particularly horrible. But so, first of all, let's just say, why are people saying you're starving the Palestinians? He goes, because we're trying to get the food in, and it's like, no, actually, you're not. For 3 months, there was not, as the finance minister, Smotrich of Israel, bragged that there was not 1 ounce of grain was allowed in. Now, this is not Israeli food that's being turned away. This is food from international charities and other nations that Israel simply isn't letting in. So the idea that they're trying to get it in, this is just completely made up nonsense. But all that aside, now also the other thing, the assertion here that Hamas steals the food when it comes in and then marks it up and charges it at an inflated price to the civilians. I've heard this asserted before. I've never seen it demonstrated, or like I've never seen actual reporting of this happening, but let's just take that as something that happens. That is not very uncommon. Like regimes operate this way, you know? I mean, they're right. Like, but the point is, when you have a full blockade for 3 months, and then a very impactful blockade for many, many years outside of that. What if you're telling me that Hamas steals the food? This reminds me, when I was a kid in the 90s, I actually remember this, but there was a little bit of a controversy, not that much, but there was a controversy that we had a full blockade around Iraq. We had invaded Iraq under George H.W. Bush. During the Clinton years, we had a full blockade and many bombing campaigns, and then of course George W. Bush invaded the country later. But when there was the blockade, there were a lot of reports. Like there was that one famous UN report that said that 500,000 children had died from starvation and malnutrition, and so this became a bit of a controversy. And what people used to say about the blockade and the sanctions on Iraq was they'd go, well, maybe if Saddam didn't have 16 palaces, he could feed his own people. Which, like, that there might be some truth to that. Okay. Like, I don't think any of us would argue that, like, Saddam Hussein had a just distribution of resources in his society. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm sure it is messed up that he's got 15 palaces and everybody else has nothing. But I think the next question from, say, the perspective of an American citizen would be like, but wait a minute, if we know that Saddam Hussein's going to live like a king no matter what, then what exactly are we doing with this sanction and blockade policy? I mean, we're not punishing Saddam Hussein. We already established he's living like a king no matter what. So who are we punishing? And then the question becomes like, who are you punishing when you use starvation as a weapon in war? When you deny food into a war-torn area, who are you punishing? And I think this is one of the things that's missed by so many people is it's like the who you know you're not punishing is the regime itself. They will eat, right? If you've established they are going to get what they need. So what are you telling me, Netanyahu? In order to get to Hamas, we'd have to what? Starve the entire civilian population? Like, if you're telling me that Hamas is good, the regime is going to make sure that the regime itself and then its military are fed. This is always the case when there's these starvation blockades. And what ends up happening is that when you use starvation as a weapon of war, as the Israelis are doing currently and have been doing for quite a while, when you do that, the people who are impacted are always the most marginalized people of that society that you're blockading. And typically it's the ethnicities or the religion or the race that the regime hates the most. Those are the ones they're going to let starve first. They're not going to be like, we need to feed the innocent civilians and therefore, you know, whatever, we'll starve our militants. I was going to say military, but in the case of Hamas, militants, right? They're not going to starve the leaders in Hamas. So they're going to starve the people. So in other words, translated, you're fighting a war against the civilian population. And literally there was just, I was just reading a piece about this today, literally on antiwar.com today, that the latest report that 15 more Palestinians starved to death in Gaza due to US-backed Israeli blockade. And it was including a dead 6-week-old baby. So like even if you agree with what Netanyahu's saying, like, yeah, it's Hamas, these bastards, they're stealing the food and marking up the price. It's like, okay, but then what's the point of having this policy of blockading food? Like, what is it? At this point, all you're doing is starving babies to death. And like, if you want to sit here and split the difference between like well, the responsibility isn't on the ones blocking the food. The responsibility is on Hamas for hoarding that food so that that baby starved to death. Like, all right. I mean, it seems to be that there's responsibility on all parties involved, but like, could you sit there, Rob, with a good conscience? Could you ever be in a situation where let's just say there were a bunch of people who wanted to kill you and a bunch of children, and they were all hurt and wounded and needed medicine, but you knew that the bad guys already had enough medicine for themselves and were just going to let the babies die. And you'd be like, we're still going to hold back this medicine, even though the only difference in us letting it in or holding it back is that the babies die. I wouldn't feel like I had no responsibility in that if I was the party blocking the medicine out. And how the mental gymnastics you have to leap through to convince yourself, well, we're going to do this. And as a result of us doing this, these babies will starve to death, but it's really their fault for not having a more just distribution of the food that we've allowed in so far. It's like satanic logic. I don't know.
And on top of all of that, if the issue is that they're going to take the food and convert it to money, which allows them to pay soldiers, then you probably don't want to send them money.
Yeah, probably don't want to send them hundreds of millions of dollars in cash. You probably wouldn't beg to keep the hundreds of millions of dollars in cash pouring in. That'd seem like wouldn't jive with the mission there. Anyway, let's keep playing from where we were there to hear Netanyahu's next thought.
Siding with Israel against Hamas then.
Well, up to now they've been terrorized, but guess what's happened? Since we're beating Hamas, all of a sudden we see Palestinians rising. You have to see this to believe this, okay? And they say to Hamas, hey, you're not coming into my building. You can't use my school or this hospital as your command post. We're not letting you. And they start fighting them. Now we have actually armed conflict between Palestinians and terrorists. It was unimaginable a year and a half ago. But now there are Palestinians who rise up. And, the more the better, because we can create a different future for Gaza. And we should also do something very simple that President Trump said, and it was brilliant. So that's my idea. That's how he cuts to the chase. He says, at the end of this war, the people of Gaza should have the choice. If they want to leave for other countries, they want a freedom of choice. Why are they locked in? Hell, we're not locking them in. Anybody could leave, but Hamas is locking them in. Suppose they want to leave. They want to go to another country, okay? Why shouldn't they have the freedom of choice to do that? Because this is all upside down, The victim of this horrible terrorism is called the aggressor. The people who are oppressed by Hamas are seen as supporting Hamas. Give them a choice. Give them freedom. Give them a life and give them a future. They can't have that with these Hamas stormtroopers. But the amazing thing is,
all right, let's pause there. This is some evil shit, dude. Give them the choice. Give them the choice to leave. Give them the choice. I mean, all the choices in the world, except the choice to stay in their homes and not be slaughtered. We don't want to give them that choice.
Can't go into Israel either. Can't go into Egypt. Yeah. There's also,
that's true.
I don't think you can just get into the ocean and swim away. So I don't really know where.
They do have that choice. They might be shot at, but they have the choice. Right. I mean, this is just, and again, by the way, Donald Trump was explicit that they would not have the choice to return, and also that they would not have the choice to leave. Like this is, and this is just, look, it's obvious at this point that this is just, I mean, a really creepy kind of first world way of selling an ethnic cleansing campaign. Come on, I'm just here for freedom of choice, freedom of movement. Why shouldn't they be allowed to move? Meanwhile, Israel's not willing to take any of them. But why shouldn't somebody else be free to have these people? And then, of course, it's just asking, but why not ask the question in just a different way? Like, why should any other country take them? Why should they have to leave? Why should anyone else, really, except for Israel and the U.S., be responsible for the mess that we created? And I'm not advocating we relocate the Palestinians over here. I think they're fine right where they are. And if they need to temporarily be relocated while Gaza's rebuilt, I see Tel Aviv as a great place to go send them. Like, why on earth should Israel, like, asked differently, would be like, why do you have the right to slaughter and starve a population for nearly 2 years and then ethnically cleanse them? Why the hell does anybody else have to aid you in that mission? Just really, really evil stuff, and with a pleasant spin on it. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Hexclad. Let me tell you, Hexclad is an amazing company with some amazing products. Me and my wife have been using their pots and pans for months now. We absolutely love them. If you want to cook healthier and save money, stop eating those microwavable burritos, check out Hexclad. They've got you covered. It's time to leave behind the delivery fees and scratched up pan you've been clinging to since college. You've probably already heard about how Hexclad has completely revolutionized pots and pans by combining the performance of stainless steel with the convenience and easy cleanup of non-sticks. But Hexclad's innovations don't stop there. Their Japanese Damascus steel knives are as sharp as they are tough, perfect for leveling up your meal prep. Their sleek pepper mills lets you season like a pro with precision and style. Gordon Ramsay might be one of the toughest critics in the entire world, and he used Hexclad both at home and in his Michelin star restaurants. Hexclad's products also come with a lifetime warranty. That's right. These are literally the last time you'll ever have to buy these kitchen essentials. We all hit that point in our lives where we're like, you know what? I need like a good pan. I need a good pot. I need some nice knives. Hexclad has got you covered, and you can actually get it at a very reasonable price. Pans that truly check every single box when it comes to picking your cookware. They're metal utensil safe, dishwasher safe, and oven safe up to 500 degrees. So again, these aren't the pans that you're going to get all scratched up that are going to be a pain. These are really going to be ones that are with you for a long time. And now, for a limited time only, our listeners can get 10% off your order with our exclusive link. Just head to hexclad.com/problem. One more time, that's Hexclad, HEXCLAD.com/problem. Make sure you let them know that we sent you when you get there, and get yourself 10% off the best cookware you will ever own. All right, let's get back into the show. Any other thoughts, Rob?
Well, he is smooth with the spin. Sits in his chair, unwavering, and just delivers his facts.
Yeah, that's
you got to give him that.
All right, let's go to the. I think we had one more Netanyahu clip, right?
I think I had two more here.
Two more. All right,
Yes.
let's hit the next one.
Or maybe that one was two of them. I don't know.
Yeah, let's go to the next one. We'll figure it out.
I would say is a paragon of freedom in an area that doesn't exactly enjoy freedom, and to have young Americans march and support these mass rapists, these people who beheaded men, who burned babies alive. I'm talking about the Hamas monsters. Is that their ideal? They know nothing. I mean, they don't know what they're talking about. And I want to bring that truth to them. So Israel is a great free society and the best partner that America has anywhere on earth.
Great people there for sure. When we visited, everyone was so welcoming, and people were inviting us over for dinner and stuff. But I see, like, that's the thing too. I'm not claiming to be an expert too, but I'll just read stuff on like X, and like people will say like Israel's killing babies, or like they're starving people.
That's completely false. In fact, the reason we have civilian casualties in Gaza is because Hamas, who are basically horrible murderers and killers, okay, committed to our destruction and your destruction. They say so openly. I mean, they say the big enemy, the real enemy, the great Satan is America. And Israel is the small Satan. But it's a small Satan that is standing in their way of conquering with other Iranian proxies, conquering the Middle East, and then we move on to you. So America is the great Satan, and America, needs to disappear. And we stand in their way. But one of the things you have to understand is Gaza is the densest urban environment you can find, and Hamas embeds itself in the civilian population of Gaza, the Palestinians, okay? We tell the Palestinians, hey, leave, because after they butchered us and raped our women and beheaded our men and burned our babies, we have to remove this threat. So we come in to take care of the Hamas terrorists. But the Hamas terrorists don't leave the civilian neighborhoods. And we say to the civilians, we call them up because we have their telephone numbers. We say, leave, please leave. We send them leaflets, millions of leaflets. Please leave. We do everything that is possible that no army has done. They want to leave. You know what Hamas does? They shoot them. You say, we want you to stay because we want to have civilian casualties, because then they can show it on CNN or all these other networks and so on and play that Israel is deliberately doing this. We're not deliberately doing anything. We'd like them to leave. And in fact, successively during the war, it's been now a year and a half, they finally do leave, most of them. So we've minimized those casualties, but it's not because we seek to have civilian casualties, it's because Hamas wants them. They're willing to sacrifice their own children, their own families, both because they don't really care for human life, but also because they think it's very good propaganda against us. And if they just let them leave the war zone, get to this.
You know, I gotta say, it's like after, just spending a considerable amount of time talking about this issue and doing a lot of debates on this subject, I'm still just blown away, no pun intended, by this defense. Like, it's like, I just don't even know, in what world does this even sound persuasive to say? Like, in what world where someone goes like, hey, you killed a lot of people, and you're like, yeah, no, I know that makes me sound like the bad guy when you say I've killed a lot of people. But what about if I told you that before I killed them, I called them and went, leave or we'll kill you? Do you sound like the good guy in the movie now? Like, where in your head do you go like, that sure does sound good? He goes, and look, here's the weird part where there is like, obviously there is like half of this argument, I guess, is somewhat legitimate, where like, there's no question that, yes, Hamas's goal is to maximize the number of civilian casualties. This is the game that they're playing, to kind of demonstrate to the world how brutal the Israelis are by getting a bunch of Palestinians massacred. It turns global opinion against Israel. So like, that part of it is true. But Netanyahu is sitting here going like, well, they're going to make these people stay because they're willing to sacrifice them. And then even without having to explicitly admit it, it's right there implied, is like, and then, yeah, we're also willing to sacrifice them. It's like, okay, so there's a common agreement here. You both think at that point, all right, the price is worth it. So, we told them to leave and they didn't, so we're going to kill all of them. And like, to sit there and then they try to play this game where like, if anybody else, let's say in the Western world, goes like, whoa, no, that is not acceptable at all, that then you come to agreement with Hamas and go, yes, it's fine to kill all these civilians now, and to claim that if you object to that, therefore you're buying into Hamas propaganda, is just so childish and ridiculous. Like, why can't it just be option C? I'm over here where I don't like Hamas or you, and I think it's wrong that they want civilian casualties, and I think it's wrong that you're giving it to them. Like, what world are we living in? It's like and then they have the nerve. The Israeli defenders have the nerve to use the term moral clarity, as if like there's clarity to what Benjamin Netanyahu is saying here, but there's not moral clarity to the people who go like, well, if you said move and the babies haven't been moved, don't drop bombs on them. What other options do we have here? Because that's not an acceptable one. And you know, I mean, I don't know. It's wild to even hear people try to explain that. You know, I've heard so many people try to make this argument, and now hearing it, you know, from Benjamin Netanyahu himself, and you're like, this just doesn't work. This doesn't make any sense. This is so diametrically opposed to how any of us would ever conceive of morality or moral clarity, for that matter. That you're like, wait, so you told them to move and they did. Even in your scenario, which again, Rob, I mean, you know, and you can get in here and respond too, but like, it does not, you know, the human shields argument, I'm sorry, this just does not account for 80% of the buildings in Gaza being leveled. Okay. You may have a few examples here or there of where Hamas had some weaponry in schools or mosques or something like that. But can anyone show me some evidence that it was around 80% of the buildings in Gaza? No, you can't even come anywhere close to that. You'd almost have to believe that the entire civilian population was Hamas in order to justify destroying this level of the place. But again, much like with the food blockade, even in Benjamin Netanyahu's scenario here, you go, so we tell the people to leave, the people want to leave, Hamas puts a gun in their face and says, you can't leave. That person still feels like a victim to me. Like, where exactly have you gotten to the place where now it's morally acceptable to slaughter these people by the tens of thousands, probably getting up into hundreds of thousands? But like, what? Why? Because so they were forced, and so therefore, like, where in what movie, in what logical train of thought do you go like, you know, like there's a hostage situation over at the bank and they've taken 20 hostages, but we told the hostages to leave. The problem is the man with the gun who took the hostages all told them they're not allowed to leave. So now we got to blow the building up and there's no more moral issue with that. Like, wait, what? No, that sounds like you're just telling me in a different way that your instruction to leave was meaningless because they don't meaningfully have the option to leave according to what you're saying. So, and again, to think of why it would be that people in the Western world would object to this, and to even have to start going, it's because they've been propagandized or they've been lied to or they're siding with Hamas or whatever. It's like, but why can't the option be that we just simply find that horrific in modern societies? We just don't have that view of life being so valueless. And we're like, yo, like, you can't just kill kids. We insist that you exhaust every option before you ever even consider doing that. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Monetary Metals, a phenomenal company run by great people. And now you can unlock a 12% return on silver. If you're ready to start building your wealth by putting your precious metals to work, check this out. Now, of course, silver isn't just a precious metal. It's a tangible asset and a great way to diversify any investment portfolio. But with Monetary Metals, you don't just own physical silver, you own silver that works for you to generate more silver, growing your total ounces over time. And right now, you can earn 12% annual interest on silver, paid in silver, in their latest offering if you're an accredited investor. Just click the link in the episode description to learn more, or go to monetary-metals.com. As I've told you before, Monetary Metals is revolutionizing the way you invest in gold and silver. They've been paying interest in silver and gold for over 8 years, helping people grow wealth in real tangible assets. Finally, there's a true alternative to saving in dollars, a yield on gold and silver with Monetary Metals. Again, check them out at monetary-metals.com. All right, let's get back into the show. Anyway, I don't know. Any thoughts to this, Rob?
Well, I agree with all that. I picked up on two other things. One is this constant claim of if Israel wasn't there, then I guess the Arab nations are coming for all of us. And if Israel did not exist, let's just imagine the country did not exist. I don't think there would be some giant threat of Iran expanding and taking over the whole globe. And thank you so much, Israel, for sitting there and taking the brunt of it for us. I don't believe that storyline. The other thing that I picked up on, and there was more of this in the rest of the episode, and half of this I think a lot of people will not agree with me on, but the first half there's no argument against, which is he likes to talk about how free and open of a society Israel is, and it's like, yeah, if you're on the right sides of the walls of it, like, yeah, I guess if you manage to be an Israeli citizen, you can be as gay, trans, or whatever as you want, and they'll be real inclusive. But if you're on the other side of that wall, all this freedom that he's describing does not exist for you. And then I did think, talking about just being persuasive, and listen, I'm all for, for all the jokes I make, go live whatever lifestyle you want. I don't care. Does not affect me. But there is something funny about, I don't know that they're conservative, but if you're trying to win over the American right and you're talking about how progressive your society is, I don't know that sells. And then there's a particular contradiction of biblical mandate, I guess, to engage in this kind of existence and warfare while also celebrating your gay communities in Tel Aviv, which I'm not saying that this is the worst of the contradictions, nor am I saying that I have a problem with the gay community in Tel Aviv. I'm just saying it does also just stand there as a logical contradiction of, wait, so you got a biblical right to have this government now, but you also get to have all this modern thing here? That doesn't really add up to me.
No, dude, those are both excellent points. And there is something kind of amazing about Israel gets to be all of these different things for all of these different people, and depending on which person you talk to, they're, you know what I mean? Like, and like, so like I remember Will Chamberlain arguing when I debated him about this, that like the reason why right-wingers ought to support Israel is because they're a right-wing government, and there's so few right-wing countries out there that we ought to support this one right-wing country. And then if you go listen to like the right-wingers, the settlers in the West Bank, they'll just straight up tell you, is that wonderful documentary The Settlers really covered, but there's been lots of you know, interviews with these people over the years, and they'll tell you in their own words that, like, what their justification is for why they're allowed to go colonize the West Bank. And what is it, Rob? It's like, because God gave it to us, period. This is Judea and Samaria. It is what is promised by God to us. And these other people, these non-chosen people who are on it, like, sorry,
They're not us.
but like, yeah, God's already made up his mind, and this is for us. So we have the right to do whatever we want to. And it is amazing that you can be like this. You could try to brag about being a right-wing society. You can brag about how you're the original biblical chosen tribe of God. And then also, when you're attacking the outside Muslim world, your go-to is like, but we have women and gay rights. There is just a contradiction there that you can't deny. And I do think you also make a point, whereas it probably is important to point out that, like, yeah, look, we don't actually want to live in a society where gays are thrown off buildings or whatever, which, by the way, I don't think that was a thing that was happening in Gaza. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I know I'd read about, like, in Pakistan that happened. But anyway, but yeah, we don't want to live in a society where it's illegal to be gay, or violence is brought upon people simply for you know, being homosexual. And we don't want to live in a society where, like, women are oppressed and aren't given the rights to, like, you know, have basic natural rights. But I do think I agree with you, Rob. There's something about just in our current moment, in our current culture, I think going on to the Nelk Boys show and being like, you got to side with us because we're so much more LGBTQ friendly or something like that, doesn't seem to be the message that's really resonating with the time. You know, that's my guess. But yes, and I would just go back over your first point, because I mean, there's really nothing I can add except put an exclamation point behind what you were just saying. But like the idea that Hamas, with the aid of Hezbollah or something like that, is not only going to take over the Middle East, they're going to take over Europe and North America too, if not for a country the size of New Jersey who needs $4.5 billion of welfare every year to live from us. If not for our welfare, New Jersey-sized state in the Middle East, they'd just be taking over the whole world. But because of Israel, you see, they can't even take over Gaza. Like, I mean, this is just purely it's relying on the fact that you'd have to know absolutely nothing. You'd have to know absolutely nothing about anything in order for you to ever think that there was a chance. I mean, if you tried to really think to yourself about how much more powerful, say, I don't know, Spain is, you know, like just in terms of like, or Germany or something like this, right? Like how much more in terms of like GDP, in terms of, you know, like in terms of technological advancements, like these are countries that are just enormously more power than Hezbollah. Hezbollah is, you know, I mean, at this point they're pretty beat up, but even before like the pager attack or something like that, Hezbollah was what? Like a militia who controlled southern Lebanon, who had kind of made the transition into being like a political entity. Like they had gotten big enough where you would probably call them not just like, you know, not just the militia that they were in the 80s or even in the early 2000s. They would almost be something approaching like kind of a military, but still they're not like a European rich country or anything like that has that type of GDP to pull on. Hamas, I mean, give me a break. But like, anyway, so my point being like, let's say Germany is like 100,000 times more powerful than any of them. If anyone told you right now that Germany was going to take over all of Europe and then take over North America, you'd immediately be like, there's just no chance. It's just ridiculous. There's no chance that they're capable of doing that. As I thought it was ridiculous when people were saying Vladimir Putin's going to take Poland next. You know what I mean? Like, you sit there and you go, really? A country with like a $2 trillion GDP that's struggling to take Ukraine is going to pick a fight with all of NATO next? But like, as ridiculous as that was, that just, I mean, it pales in comparison to saying that that Iran and her proxies will take over the entire world. This is it. We'd all be speaking Persian if it wasn't for Israel. That's what you're going with, Netanyahu? Really? That was your final answer? All right. I don't know. Here, let's keep playing a little bit and we could respond one more time and then we'll call it an app.
Safe parts, safe havens that we've created in Gaza, no one would be hurt. And the minute Hamas lays down its arms, surrenders, maybe we let them leave Gaza, that's the end of the war. No one gets hurt.
What would your message be to Palestinians that just want to have like a peaceful life?
Get rid of Hamas. Help us get rid of Hamas. They torment you. They oppress you. They shoot you in the back of the head. If you want to leave the war zone, they kill you. And if you say a word in protest, they'll kill you. If you're gay, you're in bad shape, really bad shape. And if you are a woman, you're chattel, you're nothing. Your property. That's the opposite of everything we believe in. I say, it's not only Israel, it's you. Mm-hmm. So we're the same.
How do you respond to, like, I'd say there's a lot of American support from the females, from the gays towards Palestine. So how does that make any sense?
That's, gays for Gaza is like answer. Chickens for KFC. I mean, that's insane. The whole thing is absurd. Chickens for KFC, right? Gays for Gaza, or, women for the women of Gaza. What are you talking about? They're completely subjugated. They've got this death cult that is contaminated. So you can push this stuff on TikTok or whatever on the stuff, but you can't build peace or security on the rocks. They'll crash. I mean, these things will crash on the rocks of Middle Eastern realities. You can only build peace on truth.
Yeah. All right. Here, you can pause there. It's again, it's only when you completely, attempt to deny any Israeli responsibility for any of these things that you can even get away with these talking points. But like, I also do, you get this a lot in these type of conflicts. And the way I typically would say it would be like this. And this really is because I guess I'm like grounded in like libertarian principles. That is kind of how I, view the world. But, when you're talking about a conflict, any type of like violent conflict, and the way we think of law or what law ought to be or what governments ought to do or something like that. So like if there's a bar fight that breaks out and there's, the police come and they're the fight's broken up and they're asking witnesses and they're asking the two people involved in the fight, the relevant questions that we would all assume that the cops should have, or that like essentially what the law ought to be, is you'd be like, what happened here? Who was the aggressor? Right? Like even though that is like the same thing your parents like would ask little kids, like who started it, but that's usually the point you're trying to get to, like who's the aggressor here? If the story is you were sitting here talking to your friends and this guy came over and attacked you and you defended yourself, well then you'd be like, the guy who attacked you is the criminal, the guy who's defending you themselves is not a criminal, right? Like that's, and if someone were to come in here and go like someone was giving a witness statement and they were like, well, let me tell you, they're like, hey, so what happened in this fight? And they told the cops, they go, well, first of all, this guy is like a really great guy and he's really nice to his wife and his kids and his friends. This guy's a jerk, stays out all hours of the night, never even calls his wife back. You would hope that immediately the police officer would go, this is all irrelevant information to me. Like, and that doesn't mean it's irrelevant in life. Like it's important to be nice to your wife and your friends, but like that has nothing to do with this conflict and how I ought to feel about you know what I'm saying? Like the question here is like, who's killing innocent people? Who's the aggressor? Who has the right to do what and who doesn't? And so there is this thing where people go, you know, they'll be like, oh, look at these queers for Palestine dummies. Now, look, I'm sure me and you, Rob, have some political disagreements with any leftists who's putting queers for blank on any shirt. I'm sure we don't have the same worldview as them. We don't have the same principles, and we would draw very different conclusions about many different issues. But that being said, I am going to stick up for the queers for Palestine people a little bit on this, where this argument by Netanyahu and many of the Israel supporters is just fucking stupid. It's really dumb. The queer kids at some college campus in the United States of America, when they say queers for Palestine, they're not saying, I would prefer to live under Islamic law than under Israeli law, any more than in the bar fight you're talking about who treats their own family better. They're saying, I feel bad for the innocent women and children who are being slaughtered. And we're against, us gay people in America are against doing this to these innocent people. That's the comment they're making. And in the same sense that, like, you know, because I've actually had this happen in debates before where people have been like, you know, talking about what a brutal dictator Saddam Hussein was or something like that. And you're like, yeah, but that's not the question. Like, if anybody, like, it's not a gotcha to say anybody who was out protesting the war in Iraq in 2002 and 2003, or 2003 when it was launched, but anyone who was out protesting the war, if you were to say to them, hey, I bet you'd rather live in George W. Bush's America rather than live in Saddam Hussein's Iraq, is that a gotcha? Is that like, yeah, you're right, shit, I shouldn't be opposing this war? Because there's lots of things about Iraqi society that I would not like to live under. It's like, but that's not the relevant question. You were never going to go live in Iraq under Saddam Hussein. You know what I mean? Like, what does that have to do with it? The question is, do we have a right to launch this war? Are we being lied into this war? Will this war result in many innocent people dying? And so if the answer to all of that was yes, which it was, then if the answer was no, we don't have the right, yes, we are being lied to, and yes, a whole bunch of innocent people are going to die, then you were right to oppose the thing. And so likewise, a gay person in America saying, I'm against what Israel's doing to Palestine, it's not a gotcha that it's like, well, I bet you wouldn't like to go live under Hamas-controlled Gaza. Like, what? Yeah, that was never really on the table. They were never about to go do that. So actually, like, I don't think it exactly makes sense to call your thing queers for Palestine. How about just like be people for Palestine? I don't know. You know, just be against slaughtering innocent people in Palestine. I think all the fucking, you know, identitarian stuff where it's completely unnecessary is not helpful. But also this right-wing own is actually pretty weak. There's no real argument there. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's some dumb lefties who have said some dumb things, but I don't really think the message of Queers for Palestine is there are no issues for openly gay people in Muslim countries. I don't actually think that's what they're claiming. I think what they're claiming is like, yeah, but still don't go slaughter innocent people because of that, which does seem reasonable to me. But anyway, I'll leave it there. If there's anything else you'd like to add, Rob, go ahead. If not, just plug your gigs one more time and we'll wrap up.
Yeah, everyone, check out the Run Your Mouth podcast. Check out my Zorohead show. I think people that listen to this would particularly like the last interview I just did with David Stockman. And then, of course, you can go to porchtour.com, and there's a whole lot of Porch Tour dates, including this weekend in Johnston, PA on Sunday, Saturday in Brewston Mills, West Virginia, and Friday back in Doylestown, PA. So come hang out.
Hell yeah. Check Rob out there. Catch you guys next time. Peace.